You've probably felt it before mid-conversation. Your heart open your words, just beginning to form something tender, and then it happens. Their eyes shift. A phone is glanced at. Their body angles just slightly away. And though they're still there in front of you, part of them has already left. You feel it in your chest like a slow, quiet drop in temperature. Like the air between you has gone colder, thinner. You keep talking, maybe hoping to win them back. Maybe telling yourself you're imagining it. But deep down, a soft ache begins to echo. You feel dismissed, not through argument or rejection, but through absence. I know that ache. I know what it's like to walk away from those moments, feeling unseen, unheard. Not because you weren't speaking, but because your words didn't land anywhere. Like you were throwing your voice into a canyon and waiting for an echo that never returned. For the longest time, I thought something was wrong with me. Maybe I was too quiet. Maybe I wasn't interesting enough. I replayed moments on loop. Should I have said it differently? Did I talk too long? Did I come off as needy? But then I started noticing something. It wasn't always about the words I used. It was the space I was speaking from. Because when we speak from a place of needing to be heard, needing validation, needing to be understood, we unknowingly tighten. We lean forward too far. We reach for connection in ways that feel heavy even if we don't mean to. And the people around us, often without realizing, begin to pull back. Not because they don't care, but because they can sense that invisible weight. It doesn't make them bad, and it doesn't make you wrong. It simply means there's something deeper going on beneath the surface. Something tender that needs to be held, not just by others, but by you first. So maybe this isn't just about how to get people to listen. Maybe it's about coming home to the part of yourself that's aching to be heard, even if no one else is in the room. Sometimes it's not the sentence we speak that people hear, it's the energy wrapped around it. The words may sound right, the tone might be calm, but what's underneath? That's what people respond to. If you speak while holding your breath, the room can feel it. If you speak with an undercurrent of needing approval, people might not know why, but they'll quietly begin to drift. And if you speak from a place of proving something, even just to yourself, it often lands like a monologue, not a moment of shared connection. I say this not to shame you, not at all. I say this because I've lived there, on the other side of conversations that didn't land, wondering why people stopped listening. I was doing everything right. I tried to be articulate. I tried to be composed. But there was something behind my words, something even I hadn't noticed. I wasn't really speaking to connect. I was speaking to be saved. Saved from the fear that I didn't matter. Saved from the silence that felt like rejection. And when your words carry that quiet fear, people don't hear what you say. They feel what you're holding back. So how do you shift this? You pause. You come back to your breath. You ask, what part of me is speaking right now? If it's the part that's desperate to be validated, take a moment. Not to silence it, but to hold it gently. To say you're safe. You're allowed to speak, but you don't have to convince anyone. Because your truth doesn't need performance. It only needs presence. And presence isn't about being impressive. It's about being real. So maybe it's not that people don't want to hear you. Maybe they're just waiting to meet the part of you that isn't performing. It sneaks in quietly, the need to be right. You don't mean to correct people to prove anything. Maybe you just want the facts to be clear. maybe you just want to help. But slowly, without realizing it, conversation becomes a court, and you sit as the judge, subtle, silent, but always assessing. I used to do it constantly. Someone would say something slightly off, and I'd jump in to clarify. Well, actually, became my catchphrase. Not out loud always, but in my tone, in my posture, in that tightness in my jaw when I didn't agree. And you know what it did? It pushed people away. Because when someone feels corrected even gently, they don't feel seen. They feel small. They feel like they're being watched, not welcomed. Conversations aren't meant to be competitions. They're meant to be communion. But when the mind is more interested in accuracy than connection, the heart quietly steps out of the room. The truth is, you don't need to prove you're smart. You don't need to control the narrative. You're not in danger if someone shares something you would have said differently. In fact, sometimes the most generous thing you can do is let the moment breathe. Let the story be imperfect. Let the facts be a little fuzzy. Let the human behind the words shine through. Because the people we remember, really remember, aren't always the most articulate. They're the ones who made us feel safe, even when we were messy. So ask yourself next time your instinct is to jump in and correct. Am I speaking to connect, or am I speaking to control? One path creates distance. The other builds a bridge. You don't need to be interesting. You just need to be real. There's this myth that to hold attention, you have to entertain, that your words have to sparkle, that your timing has to be perfect, that you need a strong opener, a twist, a punchline. But the truth, the most magnetic thing you can do is be a little unpolished. Not careless, just human. I remember sitting in a circle where someone shared a story about losing their job. It wasn't the job loss that held us. It was the pause right in the middle of their sentence when they said, "Honestly, I didn't tell anyone for weeks. I felt ashamed. Like I only mattered when I had a title." There was a silence after that. Not awkward sacred. Because suddenly, everyone in the room saw a piece of themselves. That's the moment we lean in. Not when someone sounds impressive, but when they sound true. You've probably felt it too. Those moments when someone drops their guard for just a second, and in that space your heart opens. Not because they're strong, but because they're soft. You don't have to rehearse vulnerability. You just have to allow it. So the next time you share a story, resist the urge to wrap it in a bow. Let it sit a little messy. Let the feeling peek through the cracks. Let your voice shake if it needs to. Let the pause be heard. Because perfection doesn't make us connect, it makes us perform. And no one remembers the performance. They remember the pause the moment you stop trying to impress and let yourself be felt. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the mood before anyone said a word? That's the power of unspoken energy. It moves faster than language. It travels ahead of your words. And it tells people whether they should open up or shut down. Most people think they're being polite, present, even kind. But underneath their energy says something else. Maybe it's, "I need you to like me," or "I need to sound smart," or "Please don't judge me." And here's the tricky part. We're not always aware we're doing it, but others feel it. They feel it in the slight edge of your tone, in the way your eyes scan the room, in the tiny pause before you respond. People are intuitive. They don't always know what's off, but they know when something's not safe. I used to speak with tension in my chest, smiling, nodding, but silently hoping the other person wouldn't disagree, wouldn't challenge me. It wasn't about the words. It was about the fear underneath them. And that fear built walls. The shift happened when I stopped trying to prove something, when I let myself speak with nothing to protect, when I let go of needing to be seen a certain way and just showed up. Not perfect, just present. That's what draws people in. Not your eloquence, not your facts, but your calm, your ease, your quiet invitation. You don't have to be anyone else around me, because that's the kind of space we all crave and rarely find. There's a particular kind of ache that comes when you finally let your guard down and no one meets you there. You share something real, a truth wrapped in years of silence. You pause waiting for them to feel it, to see you. And what comes back? A blank stare, a nod, a quick change of subject. And in that moment, something inside you tightens. You tell yourself, maybe I shouldn't have said that. You feel silly, exposed, like you showed up to a dance and no one remembered the music. But here's what I've learned. Not everyone is ready to hold space. Not everyone knows how to meet truth with stillness. Some people are too distracted, too guarded, too lost in their own noise. And that doesn't mean you were wrong to share. Your vulnerability is not wasted just because it wasn't received. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is speak your truth anyway, not to be validated, but to stay honest with yourself. You're not responsible for how others receive you. You're only responsible for being real. And every time you choose to show up with openness, even when it goes unnoticed, you strengthen the bridge back to yourself. That's what this moment is about. Not performance, not approval, but presence. You're not here to be heard by everyone. You're here to stay true to the voice within you, even when the room stays silent. Sometimes you can say all the right things and still feel like you've lost the room. You think I was calm, I was kind, I didn't interrupt. But something in the air still turned cold. And maybe you left wondering, what did I do wrong? But what if it wasn't your words? What if it was the energy behind them? We don't often talk about emotional posture. That invisible stance your presence takes before your voice even arrives. The truth is, people feel you before they hear you. They sense if you're tense, if you're trying too hard, if you're carrying an unspoken need to be accepted. And when your energy says, please validate me, others feel that as pressure, not connection. But when you show up, not to prove anything, not to impress, defend, or dominate, but just to share, to witness, to be the whole conversation, shifts. Think about the people you feel safest around. It's not because they're clever or charming. It's because they feel settled in themselves. Their energy invites yours to rest. That kind of presence doesn't need to speak loudly. It doesn't chase applause. It doesn't anxiously scan for approval. It simply is. And in that simplicity, something sacred happens. People soften hearts open, and listening becomes effortless. So the next time words fail or connection feels out of reach, ask yourself gently, not what you said, but what you brought with you. Not all communication begins with the mouth. Some of the most important messages begin in the quiet energy between two souls long before the first word is spoken. You can pour your heart out and still be met with silence. You can share your truth, your vulnerability, your story that took everything in you to speak. And the person in front of you just nods or glances at their phone or changes the subject entirely. It hurts, doesn't it? It feels personal, like rejection, like maybe you did something wrong. But here's the gentle truth that took me years to believe: not everyone has the capacity to hold what you're offering, and that has nothing to do with your worth. Some people are emotionally unavailable, not because they don't care, but because they haven't yet learned how to hold space for another human being. Some are too lost in their own noise. Some are too afraid of silence. And others, they're simply not the ones meant to hear you. You are not too much for the right people. But you might be too deep, too raw, too honest for the ones still hiding behind polite masks. And that's okay. The goal isn't to convince everyone to stay. The goal is to keep speaking your truth, even when some can't receive it. Because every time you do, you become a little more whole, not because you were validated, but because you listened to yourself enough to speak. In a world full of noise, your voice matters not to everyone, but to someone. And sometimes the most important person who needs to hear you is you. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to impress anyone with perfectly crafted sentences or stories rehearsed in your head. You don't need to try so hard to be interesting. Because the most unforgettable voices aren't the ones that shout. They're the ones that arrive gently, that say what they mean and mean what they say. They're the voices that are rooted, present, awake. People remember how they felt around you far longer than they remember what you said. And when your presence feels like peace, like honesty, like breath, something changes. They stop scrolling. They soften their shoulders. They lean in. And even if they forget the details, they remember that you made them feel safe. That's the real voice people crave. The one that doesn't beg to be heard. The one that listens just as much as it speaks. The one that doesn't try to dominate the room, but makes space in it. So today, instead of chasing the perfect words or worrying about who stays and who fades, just bring yourself. Your real self. The self who's learning to stop performing. The self who no longer needs every sentence to land. The self who is willing to pause and simply be here. That is the voice people remember. And more importantly, that's the voice you'll never forget.